Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are the Rojas Roadrunner broadcast team, and today we will be talking about the North Korean nuclear crisis. I am Brigitte Marin, and joining me tonight are Brittany Gass and Annette Rodriguez. The date is Saturday, April 13th, and the time is 5 p.m.
We will begin our coverage with an analysis of the connection between Immanuel Wallenstein's world system theory and how it relates to the global media coverage of the North Korean nuclear crisis.
Following this coverage will be a brief history of the events which led up to the current relationship between the United States and North Korea. Next, I will review the coverage of the UK network BBC, and Annette will discuss the coverage of North Korea's newspaper, Korean News Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
We will then conclude with a brief summary of our findings.
The New York Times is the most visited newspaper website in the United States, and its printed version is the #3 news source in the country. With such a high volume of traffic, it is evident that many individuals in the U.S. and around the world seek out the Times coverage of national and world news. Though, as audiences absorb the Times reports of North Korea's nuclear activity, it is encouraged that said coverage be speculated upon for its merit and bias. Utilizing Immanuel Wallenstein's world systems theory, we can take a closer look into the New York Times treatment of the North Korean nuclear crisis, taking into consideration the quality of the coverage with respect to bias and framing. According to world systems theory, North Korea is a periphery nation because of factors such as its notably exploitive working conditions and its low levels of technological involvement, both production and utilization. Also important is that North Korea repeatedly demonstrates high incidences of national corruption. Such an example is seen clearly in North Korea's failure to cooperate with U.S. efforts to control human trafficking within its own borders as well as overseas through the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. As of today, North Korea is still considered to be a Tier 3 country, the lowest rank, for its failure to neither meet minimum standards of safety nor show any efforts to comply. It is behavior such as this that has the potential to create bias in reporting. From the perspective of an American reporter, who presumably researches and reports with high regard to social justice, one can surmise that achieving total neutrality and objectivity would be a difficult task when reporting the nuclear activity of a nation renowned for the unethical treatment of its people. Another aspect of this potential for bias is the way in which North Korean government controls the media access to information. With a strictly regimented militant government and tightly secured borders, all information of events reported by American journalists is filtered through the media gatekeepers of the North Korean government. American journalism, which is known for its if it bleeds, it leads mentality, is motivated to deliver news that will captivate audiences with a shock factor. Such efforts to captivate are seen in the pejorative language used in Times headlines to describe North Korea's actions. Such language includes attack, threat, tension, war, and arsenal, to name a few. Supplementing the tone of Times North Korea coverage is the frequency with which articles are written. Since early February of this year, when the initial threats began, the New York Times has produced on average 1 article per day, discussing the threats of South Korea, China, and the U.S. An aspect of bias is evident within the reporting of the New York Times.
North Korea's ties with the United States can be traced back all the way from the end of the Cold War. Issues and trouble with American foreign policy have basically made an orthodoxy situation in that the U.S. has been unwilling to use military force. Most Americans are certainly much more amenable to other forms of overseas engagement than to military intervention. One of the issues that have taken over throughout the years in the U.S. political agenda is stopping the spread of mass destruction, specifically North Korea's nuclear threats of attacking significant regions in the U.S. Despite efforts taken as early as 1985 when the Non-Proliferation Treaty was signed, North Korea has still managed to remain solid on its decision to develop nuclear arms. U.S. true intervention started out as North Korea signed an agreement with South Korea on December 31, 1991, pledging to have a nuclear-free peninsula, but refused to carry it along the way. The U.S. then intervened by adopting a strategy of threats and inducements, resuming team spirit military exercises in South Korea to induce fear and power against North Korea. No other country had ever been the target of more American nuclear threats than North Korea since 1945. Furthermore, South Korea has had difficulty with North Korea throughout the years since both were at due tensions to an anti-communist perspective by South Korea. Often, North Korea interprets South Korea as a puppet of Japanese and Americans. The way both countries viewed the relationship they had with the U.S. was extremely different. On one side, South Korea viewed the U.S. as their insurance against any possible attack, while to North Korea, the U.S. seemed to be an authoritative threat. Some of the major fears the U.S. had towards this issue were the possible consequences of a nuclear North Korea, which were regional security, proliferation, and nuclear proliferation regime. In addition, in order to resolve some of these issues, the six-party
Hello, and thank you for continuing to watch while we cover this breaking news event. This story has caught the attention of BBC and has been front page news over the past couple of months. BBC has done a great job on covering not only what is going on in North Korea and how it is affecting the United States, but also on covering how it can affect anyone. For example, in the article North Korea's Missile Program, written on December 12, 2012, BBC focuses on the current missiles that North Korea has and their danger to other countries. This image shows the range of the missiles that they are known to have. In the image, you can see the ranges go from 1 to 4, 4 being the largest span of damage and by far the worst possible outcome. Though they have not put nuclear warheads, they are still deadly missiles. A big question that BBC has struggled to find an answer to is why. In another article, Analysis, What is Driving North Korea, published on January 29, 2013, shows that they would like to create a deterrence. Quote, North Korea has sought to become a nuclear state to protect itself from its adversaries, most notably the U.S., with which it remains in a state of war. Another reason given is prestige and legitimacy. They are irritated by the limits that the UN has set and believe that if they can have the ability to build these missiles, they can overcome the limits that they have been placed. Lastly, BBC believes that technical advancement places a large role on these missile tests, and it pushes for nuclear missiles. BBC has not only focused on the testing, but also on the background. They have focused on important aspects of the North Korean crisis and the effects of what the country is doing. Although the coverage is placing blame on North Korea, it is a very balanced read.
North Korea's conflict with the U.S. has influenced the way propaganda is being distributed and presented throughout the Korean peninsula. The nuclear threats sent from North Korea to the U.S. have called for supporters, to which North Korean officials believe the best supporters are the residents. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un often is favored by the Korean news, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, as a leading winner in this said war, which not only started out as a testing nuclear attack experiment by North Korea, but has now escalated its nature into death threats, country attack threats, and the loss of a potential peace-settling relationship. In Korean news, there has been little, if not any, representation of an American figure or experts to comment on the situation. In several news stories, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is referred to as the Supreme Commander and Marshal, with a lot of emphasis placed on words like strong, defense, power, and death. Also, DPRK has been trying to convince its people of their patience against attacks, temptations, and pressure from the U.S. One topic they have argued again and again is that the U.S. has persisted in a hostile policy towards the DPRK in various fields, worsening the bilateral relations phase by phase. Furthermore, North Korea has often referred South Korea as the U.S. military's puppet and has further included comments about the country by stating it, the U.S., has worked out an operation plan for hurting the dignity of the DPRK supreme leadership in collusion with the South Korean puppet military, an argument they have led throughout the newspaper has in DPRK's nuclear deterrent as it is aimed to defend the country from a nuclear attack by the U.S. imperialists and the South Korean forces. Unfortunately, North Korea has created, if not continued, an ever-changing hostile situation by saying the arch-criminal who pushed the situation on the Korean peninsula to the brink of the war is the U.S. and its stooge South Korea puppet forces who are intensifying the racket for war exercises against the DPRK while pulling it up over its peaceful satellite launch and the nuclear test for self-defense.
In summary, analysis of the news sources, New York Times, BBC, and the Korean News Democratic revealed that there is clearly a bias within the reported media coverage of each source. The New York Times reports from a perspective of American ethical standards, and additionally frames each story with regards to the highly appealing If It Bleeds, It Leads platform. As stated earlier, this is problematic because news stories from North Korea, a country with a reputation of very poor treatment of its people, are being written in order to appeal to a nation that is conditioned to enjoy stories of bleakness and over-dramatization.
The bias BBC presents is minor in comparison to the other sources. It covers the situation from all sides but places blame on North Korea. Because BBC is an indirect source, it can cover more than just the direct threat. They have the ability to give the answers to people, as well as talking about how and why and what we can do about it.
The Korean News, People's Republic of Korea, clearly presents bias in terms of covering explicitly Korean information that is in the perspective of Korean officials and other high-ranking leaders. The information presented to the citizens is from the perspective of Kim Jong-un has towards the U.S. and his plan of destruction towards the country.
Thank you for tuning in to the Rojas Roadrunner broadcast this evening. Join us next week for an update of the North Korean nuclear crisis.
Beep!